Hello, good morning for 3 more minutes. Welcome to Studio 919 at the Texas Tribune. I'm Emily Ramshaw. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Texas Tribune, and I am thrilled to get to spend the next hour with all of you and with Cecile Richards, the co-founder of the new progressive women's activism organization, Supermajority. Welcome to Cecile.
Thank you.
Yes. So before we dive in, I just have a few housekeeping items to take care of, as always. First, I want to let you know that passes are now on sale for the 2019 Texas Tribune Festival, happening September 26th through 28th in downtown Austin. Our 3-day festival, as many of you in this room already know, is one of the largest nonpartisan gatherings of elected officials, policy experts, and community officials in the nation. You can learn more at festival.texastribune.org. I also want to let you know something else that is really important and personal for us here. In the last week, our nonprofit newsroom won 5 national Edward R. Murrow Awards, which is a big deal. But 4 of those 5 honors were for the Texas Tribune's coverage of the crisis at our southern border. The Tribune really has led the way nationally in exposing what all these separated families, families in detention have been facing. We are re-upping our efforts right now. We have already sent 3 additional reporters down to the border this year. We've reopened our Rio Grande Valley Bureau. We hosted a crowdfund last year to try to raise money for this effort. We wanted $35,000 basically to rent a house and keep folks on the ground. You all, our members, immediately contributed more than $75,000. We are doing that again this year with a similar $35,000 goal. If you can help us in any way, $5, $10, $50, anything helps, you can support us at texastribune.org/give, or you can see Sarah Glenn, who is standing in the back in that beautiful colored dress there. She can help you make a difference for our coverage. So thank you so much. All right, so please silence your phones. For those using Twitter, please use the hashtag #TTEvents. We'll also have a Q&A at the end, so please save up your wonderful questions. All right, Cecile Richards really needs no introduction in Austin, and especially with this audience, but I'm going to give her one anyway. The former president of the Planned Parenthood Federation of America and the Planned Parenthood Action Fund is now the co-founder of Supermajority, a national activist group aimed at educating and training women to further the women's political agenda in the 2020 elections. She is, of course, a Texas native, the Waco-born daughter of former Texas Governor Ann Richards.
Sorry.
Shout outs for mom, always a great idea. Cecile also founded America Votes and the Texas Freedom Network, and formerly was Deputy Chief of Staff to Nancy Pelosi. Please join me again in welcoming Cecile Richards.
Thank you, Emily.
Okay, so before we dive into Supermajority, I just want to ask you the catnip question on everyone's mind. Did you watch these 2 nights of presidential debates?
So I didn't watch the first night because I was on a train, but I followed it on Twitter, so I think I got the highlights. And I know we had a couple of Texans, so that was pretty exciting. But I did watch most of last night because, as I've already, true confessions, my daughter Lily Adams, Ann Richards' firstborn grandchild, is the communications director for Kamala Harris. And so I had, as a mother, was really, I was interested in the debate anyway, but it was especially poignant to get to watch Kamala and think about Lily. In fact, I lit my Ann Richards candle yesterday just to summon the spirit of the woman who actually taught Lily everything she knows about politics. So anyway, I thought it was a really fascinating, both nights have been fascinating.
So do we get to believe that you are a Kamala Harris fan in a big way, given the family connection and everything else?
I'm a fan of a lot of folks running, and I haven't, so I'm not trying to put my finger on the scale, but I will say having, 6 women running for the President of the United States and getting to see a debate stage where it finally just begins to look a little bit more like America is really exciting to have. Right? It's just to have 2 African-American candidates, Latino American candidate. It's just, that to me is really, really, really powerful. And I hope, and I also just want to, give credit to someone who I don't think gets enough credit for the fact that the debate stage has changed so much, and that's Hillary Clinton. Because if she hadn't gone first, we wouldn't have been able to open the door for so many women to compete this year.
Okay, so on to Supermajority. I want to start with your pivot away from Planned Parenthood after a dozen years to this entirely new activist enterprise, Supermajority. Obviously, there have been few times in history when, reproductive health care, abortion issues in particular have been under this much attack, particularly at the state level. Your leadership in that arena was critical. Was it difficult to make that move, and have you faced any pushback for doing it?
So, I've been there 12 years. I decided actually to stay a little longer because of course, once the last presidential election, we were facing potential defunding by the federal government. That was actually something that Paul Ryan, then Speaker of the House, promised that would be done right away. And so I stayed through that period because I thought it was really important for the organization to be on firm footing. And we actually won that fight, which was really amazing because of, I think, the outpouring of folks around the country. But I think one of these, Planned Parenthood, there's always an issue. If you're really trying to fight to advance reproductive rights and justice, there's never a calm time. And I'm really proud of a lot of the work we did in the last 12 years. I think it's also important that for those of us who have these jobs that are really incredibly, I think, both important jobs, and for me, the best job of my life. It was such an honor to work for Planned Parenthood for all those years. I think it's really important that we also make space for new leaders. And as hard as that is to leave a job like that, because I'll never have another one like it, I felt like we had spent a lot of time and resources investing in another generation of leadership, a diverse generation of leadership, and that it was it's not enough to just talk the talk. You have to walk the walk. And so I'm really, really proud of having not only the organization pick a new leader, but the first doctor in a long time, Dr. Lena Wen. She's doing a spectacular job. And I continue to be a full-throated supporter of Planned Parenthood and fight and will always be in the fight for reproductive justice and access in this country. And you're right, it continues to be incredibly important.
So where did Supermajority come from? How did you, Alicia Garza, the founder of Black Lives Matter, Ai-jen Poo of the National Domestic Workers Alliance, how did you all find each other? It's like this Charlie's Angels of women's activism.
I love that. In fact, we have to do a photograph now. Now that you've said that, I can't get it out of my mind. And actually, Alicia is going to be here tomorrow because we're going to kick off our first training since launching tomorrow here in Austin. Well, I had known, if you're an organizer, you know other organizers, and I've been an organizer forever, and I had known Ai-jen through her work with the domestic workers, doing really important work to lift up, honestly, the fact that so many people in this country who are taking care of our kids or they're taking care of our loved ones don't earn a livable wage and don't have the kind of benefits and support they need. And increasingly, we're all going to be relying on them. So she'd been doing that work for years, and Alicia now works with her. And so when I was leaving Planned Parenthood, I had this feeling that we had done a lot to invest as an organization in really bolstering the movement, not only to be this incredible healthcare provider, which we are, and including here in Texas. I am so proud of Planned Parenthood here in Texas, keeping the doors open day after day after day, providing that care, but also the movement side to make sure that we're improving the lives of everyone. But I knew that even though we'd grown from 3 million to, by the time I left, 12 million supporters in this country, that there were so many women we weren't reaching, actually, just for whatever reason, and that they had so many other issues. Anyway, so I talked to Ai-jen and then Alicia, and I said, I think we need to actually pull women together all across the country and really lift up a new deal for women, because women are now, we are the majority of voters, 55% of the voters in the last election. And you saw what happened as a result, historic numbers of women getting into Congress, including the first 2 Latinas from Texas. I'm so proud of Sylvia Garcia and Veronica Escobar, really just... But also, women are increasingly, since the last election, they're the volunteers. They are actually one of the most interesting statistics I read since 2016. Women last political cycle, contributed $100 million more to candidates and campaigns than they had just the year that Hillary ran. So exactly, wow, I'm so glad someone said it, because it really is, that is a lot of grassroots support. And anyway, that was the idea behind Supermajority. And a lot of people, I'll answer the question that you might want to ask, which is, what does Supermajority mean? And it means more than the majority. And that's what women are in this country. We are more than the majority. And in fact, when we harness our superpowers, we are Supermajority.
Well, so your goal, as you've said with Supermajority, is to train and mobilize 2 million American women to become organizers, activists, and leaders, and to do it ahead of the 2020 election, which we know is coming right up. This is an enormous undertaking on a very tight time schedule. So what is the strategy? And I mean, specifically, like, where do you begin?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the funny thing is, it is ambitious. But I think it's totally doable. And I'm an organizer, and I think if you can't count the numbers and can't put it down, you really aren't measuring, the work. But I know that those 2 million women exist around the country. And even we just launched about 8 weeks ago, and we had 100,000 people join immediately from all over the country. And I have seen it traveling around the states on book tour, just as listening to people making speeches. Every town in America has a women's group that has started since 2016. I mean, it is there's Cafe Con Ladies in Houston is one of my favorite groups. And I think Red Wine and Blue in Cincinnati, and the Badass Babes of Bay City in Ohio. And what I found was that all of these women were saying, we've organized, we've marched maybe, we've gone to town hall meetings. Now what more do we do? And in every town that you go in, if you say to women, let's come together, we can train you in some additional advocacy skills, civic participation, issues, connect you with each other. It's just like, as Alicia would say, it's like putting up the bat signal. Women turn up and turn out. So I believe it's absolutely possible. We're going to launch, as I said, tomorrow here at UT. We're doing a training for about 300 plus folks, and then going to Detroit, to Denver, to Portland, and that's just in the next few weeks. So it's a funny thing. As an organizer and someone who observes politics and have been involved in campaigns and issues, a lot of times the goal is actually to tell people and try to convince people that they should be interested. This is the actually opposite problem we have now in this country. It is literally, how do you deal with a tsunami of women who are raising their hands and say, I want to be part of making change? And so it's an interesting and exciting challenge to have.
So how much of it is in response to Trump? How much of it is about replicating the 2018 midterms? In all the literature on Supermajority, I've used the word progressive. You have not used the word progressive. Is this a progressive organization?
I mean, if you think, if progressive means believing that we should have equal rights for women, we are a progressive organization.
Are you a liberal organization?
I mean, I think that's what we believe. And I think actually I think that labels and nomenclature is so irrelevant to most women in this country. And when I go and listen to women, whether it's in Texas, whether it's in Ohio, Michigan, Florida, they're all talking about the same thing. It's, why are we still bless you, why are we still this day and time? Hey, how are you, sweetie? Sorry, I just saw a friend of mine. How are we this day and time in 2019, when women are almost half the workforce, still making 80 cents on the dollar? Or if you're an African-American woman, 61 cents on the dollar. If you're a Latina, 54 cents on the dollar. That's an outrage, right? And that whoever is the next president should take that on day one. Women everywhere are saying, how can I stay in the workforce when I have no maternity leave? I have no affordable child care. These are epidemic issues. And actually a woman in Congress said the other day, it was really great. She's been in Congress for a long time. She said, all the guys in our caucus, they believe in the things we believe in, but every time it comes around to doling out the money and appropriations time, we're building bridges and we're not funding the issues that women care about. And so the conceit of this all is to say, I actually believe that things that women share in common across race, across geography, across gender identity, a whole lot of things are so much greater than you would know if you read the news. And that is the idea of Supermajority. So if you believe in gender equity in this country, you could be a member of Supermajority. And I think that is the vast, overwhelming majority of people in this country.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about what you just mentioned and what you've learned in your years of experience about how best to get women engaged in the political process and the activist universe. I mean, I'm assuming the thinking behind this is that the strategy for engaging women is different from the strategy for engaging men. And so what is that strategy?
Well, it's funny. So I have 3 kids, right? Lily, who we already talked about, and but we can talk about her more, of course.
We will.
And and I have twins, Hannah and Daniel, who actually, I was pregnant with twins when mom was elected governor. So they literally grew up, in sort of the Ann Richards matriarchy. But Hannah is an organizer, and she said to me recently, she said, everywhere I go, Mom, there's all these women's groups starting. She says, I don't really see any men's groups starting. And so I just think it is different right now, that women are very motivated. But they also, a lot of women who've already joined Supermajority are saying, I've never done this before. It's not like been an activist all my life. I'm a little bit intimidated by civic engagement. I hear that a lot. And they're looking for a home where it's safe to say, I'm a first timer, I'm trying to learn. And they want to feel the kind of community with other women. And that is, I do think that perhaps is a little bit of a unique thing. I remember I was in Austin, actually, as I was doing this listening tour with Alicia and Ijen to decide whether we could actually start this thing. And I was with a group of women here in Austin just saying, what's on your mind? What are you thinking about? And I remember a young woman saying, I fought to get maternity benefits at my tech company because we didn't have any. This is Austin, right? And she said, now it was too late for me by the time we finally got we got these benefits. But then I realized we can't do this way, that I have to get more involved in politics because we can't every woman on their own fighting the same fights. But I was just in Los Angeles a couple of weeks ago, and a woman from, out of Hollywood, had been high up in the financial industry. She said, she was like way high up, and she said, I got 3 weeks leave when I had my baby. And I said, this is just not going to work. But that is, so I just think the whole idea here is, how do we quit fighting each of these battles one by one by one? Because I think women our entire lives, we've been trying to retrofit ourselves into societies and governments and cultures and business that was really created by men, for men, not created to invite us in. And so we need more than simply a change in administration. We just need a change in attitude where we realize that women, we're more than half the country, we're more than half the economy, and we're here to stay.
At the same time, you well know that women aren't monolithic, and the experience of a 60-year-old white female is categorically different from the experience of a 35-year-old black woman or a 22-year-old Latina. How do you tailor your messages or even your delivery models to these different demographics?
Well, actually, I think that is a little. Women's lives are different, and women aren't a monolith. And there are some women who don't believe in women's rights, and unfortunately, some of them are in the United States Senate, right? So we need to change that. Not naming any names, but just like, it's really, so I don't want to, women are not, somebody on the audience is going to do that. But I do think that it is important to understand that women are not a monolith. So, and this isn't for everyone, because we do really explicitly support women's rights. But I think that it's interesting when you put a room together. I was in a room recently in Phoenix there was a young woman there who was speaking, who was a dreamer, and she was talking about her living with the anxiety of her mother being deported, which was a day-to-day issue. Another young woman, was a teacher who'd been out on strike for the public school system because, of course, it's been so underfunded. There's another person there who had been an organizer or worked for Planned Parenthood. They really didn't have anything in common, but they shared so much. In terms of if you actually just pick them out of a crowd. But they shared so many values in common, and that is where I think what we were trying to lift up is what are the values that women do share, and what is the kind of country we want to live in, and then let's go build that. And that's more than simply one election or the next. We had an interesting thing happen, I thought. So when people signed up for Supermajority, we did this kind of this questionnaire where people could talk about issues they cared about, their engagement. But one thing we asked is, what's your superpower? And the single most common, on an open-ended question, single most common response was empathy, which I think is quite interesting if you think about it, in that I think that reflects the desire of women to be part of a more empathic country, looking at what's happening with this government. And I mean, the issues obviously you've been covering on the border, that what we're seeing happen to women in states. And I think that is something of value that we really can lift up, and it inspires people. So that's kind of what we're looking at. What are those values that women have in common and that help people bridge racial divides, other issues? But I will, the other thing I should say, Emily, because I should have said at the beginning, we explicitly are building Supermajority to be a multiracial, intergenerational movement for women, because that work hasn't happened as much as it should. And so it's why I'm so honored to get to do this with Alicia and iGen, and to put rooms together that probably haven't ever been together.
Well, so you've called for a woman's New Deal, and you've highlighted a big list of specifics: equal pay for women, affordable childcare, reducing the maternal mortality rate. Where does abortion politics fit into any of this, and what, if anything, is Supermajority going to be doing specifically around abortion issues at the state level?
The right of people to make their own decisions about their pregnancy and to access reproductive health care is one of the most fundamental values that not only I have, but that all of the founders have. And we've already been engaged both in Alabama and in Missouri in mobilizing Supermajority members to be active there. And I think, so this is a fundamental issue, and you can't talk about economic equity, you can't talk about equal opportunity if you actually do not have the right to control and make the decisions about your own body. That is just fundamental. And I think it's going to be interesting, and we can talk more about all these horrific bans that are being passed and enacted in states. I believe, and it's been fascinating to see the presidential debate, that the topic of abortion rights, access to safe and legal abortion, has been brought up. I think it will be a fundamental issue in the 2020 election, and a defining issue.
In light of what we've seen this term from the Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, Roberts court, is Roe in as much jeopardy as some believe it is?
Oh, 100%. I mean, the number of cases that are lined up to get to that court, it's more than ever before. And of course, that was why a lot of people were so engaged on the nomination and the hearings on Judge Kavanaugh. I think the point is really, though, and I know a lot of people have written about this, is in some ways, I don't know that there's going to be this one case where suddenly Roe is like decided to be unconstitutional. In some ways, they don't have to do that. You know, you look at the restrictions, and obviously you all have covered so many of them here at the Tribune in Texas. The number of restrictions that are being passed effectively make abortion, safe and legal abortion, unavailable anyway. And that is really my anxiety, is that and they have, been very sophisticated about just chipping away. I think it is important that Supermajority and other efforts that support abortion rights and reproductive rights and access actually lift it up, because I think for the average person in this country, it is impossible to follow the various things that are happening and the restrictions. Although I think it's increasingly easier, because they are making, the opponents of women's rights are making they're not even trying to hide behind women's health or any of these other issues. They're basically just saying, we're going to make abortion illegal in this country. And that it has gotten the attention of people. And not just women. Men believe in abortion rights as well.
Well, I'd be remiss, I think, if we didn't talk at all about the crisis on the border right now. In all of sort of Supermajority's founding documents, it says that you all will, when crises arrive, Supermajority will lend a hand. Obviously, this border crisis is in many ways a family crisis, in many ways a women's crisis, a mother's crisis. Is there a role for Supermajority in this space, or are you focused more on women who can vote and are active voters in this country?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of both, and this is a work in progress. But obviously, iGen Poo has been one of the leaders in this. A number of the other women that are engaged, and I think actually I was talking to we were at Aspen this week together, and we were talking about the fact that there is no silver bullet here on this. I think the most important thing that we can do right now, in addition to all the amazing outpouring of aid and support, is to continue to lift these issues up. Because as we know, this administration is expert at distracting people from actually what's happening. And this is not a paid political announcement for the Texas Tribune, but Your reporting,
we'll take it anyway. Thanks.
No, it's really, your reporting has kept this issue, particularly here in Texas, front and center. And we have to do that. One of the things I hear from women, and I know you and I were talking about this earlier, is that women don't feel like they have a source of good news about what is happening and what they can do about it. And we've begun to do that a little bit at Supermajority, but to me, that's a gaping problem. And of course, what women will say to you, this woman said to me in Wisconsin, she said, I see what's happening, and then all my girlfriends ask me what I should do. And so we need a place, we need a home where it provides us actually not only the information, but what can we do about it? Ultimately, though, a lot of these things, we have to be willing to say, these are political solutions. I mean, I saw and again, this is not an advertisement for Kamala Harris, but to have someone on the stage say last night, the first day as president, she would actually reinstate rights for dreamers and make sure that their families aren't deported and get kids out of cages. These are political issues, but it is critical that all of us tell the stories of what are happening. Can I go to like something else that's kind of it's not related, but I wrote a book called Make Trouble, because I just like I have to write all this down because everyone's asking me what they should do, and so I thought, okay, I'm just gonna put it in a book. And one of the things I talk about was what happened here in Texas. I think was anyone here part of the unruly mob? Okay, all right. What was we just had an anniversary, right? 5, 6. I was like, how was that 6 years ago? Anyway, I'll make this short, but it's actually an important story, which is, for those of you who weren't here for the unruly mob, this was when the legislature and then Governor Rick Perry was passing the most outrageous abortion restrictions. And I think the calculation was, well, we've already done everything else to women and they've, put up with it. So we'll just do this and no one will say anything. And it was just the opposite. As my granddaddy would say, it was like dropping a match on dry kindling, right? The state just like blew up. And young people, leaving college, driving to Austin to be in the Capitol, women leaving their kids with their neighbors and their friends in order to come and stay in the Capitol for hours until 2 and 3 in the morning just to testify against this legislation. And it didn't stop. And then, of course, our hero, Senator Wendy Davis, did her famous filibuster. And it was a moment none of us will ever forget. In fact, I remember President Obama tweeting that night, something's happening in Austin tonight. And it was like, the world was watching. But the important thing is that happened even though we never had the votes. That happened, people didn't quit, even though there was no way we could ever really win, because Rick Perry could always rig the rules. And he did. And even though Wendy won the filibuster, then they went back and they had a special session and jammed through the bills. But the important thing here is that people still didn't quit. The Texas Tribune started covering what was happening to women at the border and what was happening to women as a result of losing access to safe and legal abortion. Researchers at the University of Texas began to actually research the healthcare implications. Planned Parenthood kept providing abortion services, and folks who could comply with these insane laws did. And eventually, and women told their stories. They told their stories about going to Mexico. They told their stories about and eventually 3 years later, that case went to the United States Supreme Court. And we won that case, and Whole Women's Health was the most important abortion decision, I guess, in my time at Planned Parenthood. And the reason I tell that is because what you do matters. Because if people had quit telling their stories, Ruth Bader Ginsburg couldn't have told the stories of what was happening to women in El Paso and in the Valley. And so I think it's an interesting organizing thing about what's happening now at the border is you may not be able to fix it right now, but as we are seeing, action is being taken, not because people in government care, but because people will not quit telling the story. And that to me is just it's an important lesson for these times. And I think it's part of what Supermajority is about, is having folks realize we're not going to win everything right now, but we have to be the truth tellers about what is happening and what kind of country actually we want to build and that we want to live in, and fight for that.
Well, you've been very complimentary about the media in some regards. Flip this on its head. What bothers you most? What are your biggest pet peeves about the way female candidates are represented in the press?
Every single one, every single way they're covered in the press. But one of the things, just to be, although I did see that the Post, the headline was Kamala Harris wears black in the debate. What whatever that, it was like, and actually, of course, Lily tweeted, actually it was navy, but that's okay. But I think one of the real problems is 2/3 of political reporting is being done by men. And so until you have women, people of color, LGBTQ people, like the democracy that we are covering the news, it's always going to be slanted. And I mean, there are some people I could pick on right now that I read, like things they tweeted, white men, about the performance of some of the women in the debates. And there's just no way you can read them and go, they don't actually see the world the same. And so, look, I will say, I'm really glad that there are now women, moderators in all these debates. That's the first time in history. We got to do a lot more.
So I want to talk about endorsements specifically with Supermajority. I mean, obviously, a lot of these candidates need money. They want the support of someone like you or of the folks who are at Supermajority. What is the role of Supermajority going to be when it comes to endorsing candidates, both at the presidential or the congressional level?
I mean, I think we're going to decide, Emily. I think that's kind of a next year decision. We may form a PAC. We may endorse. I think right now we're really focused on organizing, training, activating, and connecting 2 million women in this country. And as Alicia Garza says, she's not here, so I'll say it for her. She says, if you got 2 million women in this country, you can do anything. And I really do believe, look, I think women are the most powerful political force in America. The issues that we care about are always sort of relegated to the sidelines as sort of being women's issues. And it's time that changes. And I think that's really our conceit. In fact, I'll say, even though, and I didn't do all this, the tallying of the questions, one issue that just is, that I'm obsessed with is maternal mortality rates in this country. I don't know if you all know it, but we're the only developed nation where maternal mortality rates are going up. And if you're a black woman in America, your rates are 3 to 4 times that of white women. This is an epidemic. And so all these states that are focused on passing more restrictions on reproductive access, I wish they would actually just look up for 1 minute, because this is a soluble problem in this country, and we're not doing anything about it. That didn't come up in the debates, and I can guarantee you there are women all across this country who are desperately concerned about the fact that we as a country don't seem to care.
But isn't this a moment for an organization like yours to draw a line in the sand and say, look, we have so many qualified women on the presidential stage, it ought to be one of them?
Well, I think it should be, but I also think, I'm thrilled, but I guess the way I look at it, Emily, is, and I'm really grateful. I think, Kamala's been out there for teacher pay. Of course, 3/4 of teachers in this country are women. That's a huge issue. Elizabeth has been out there on economic issues, Kirsten on reproductive issues. I'm sure Amy is but I want to know, Amy Klobuchar, who's running, who's just also fantastic. But I don't just want to know what the women are going to do about these issues. I want to know if day one, if Joe Biden is elected president, what is he going to do to make childcare affordable in this country? And so I do think that it should not be, but always has been up to the women to lift up issues that the majority of this country cares about. So I think that Supermajority, our intent is to ensure that every candidate and anyone who's elected president realizes they can't get anywhere without the support of women and without taking women's issues seriously.
So as you're looking at this slate, I'm going to keep pressing you. Who excites you the most? You talked a little bit about particular strengths for folks, but when you look at this field, who has policies or who's laid out positions that makes you the most jazzed up?
I don't know what you're pushing me to say. I really think I do, and I'm not trying to fade the heat, but I know everybody in the Senate because I worked with all of them. When I was at Planned Parenthood, there's some fantastic people, and I think they all have creative ideas. And I was really proud of Julian Castro the other night. As a Texan, it was just, he really acquitted himself well. And obviously, Beto has changed the shape of the electorate in this state. So I don't have a favorite. I really am more focused on making sure that the issues we care about don't go to the side. And again, I guess I am kind of cheating, but just to recognize for men that are running, they can't get elected without a majority of women. This is one other thing. I just like to always try to lay down a couple of pieces of information in case folks don't know it. The most reliable voters in this country and the most reliable progressive voters in this country are African-American women, and that's been this way for our entire lifetime, okay? People need to know that. And because I think it's important, even as we talk about women and the role that women are playing, to recognize the critical role that African-American women have always played. And now we need other women to do their share as well. And obviously, I know there's been a lot of conversation about the fact that a plurality of white women voted for Donald Trump. And that grieves me. And that means white women, we can't rely on women of color anymore to save us from ourselves. We have to do this work as well. And I think that's part of the real intention of Supermajority.
Well, you come from a family of legendary women in progressive politics. What's it been like to watch your daughter now at the center of this moment, last night, that could change the trajectory of the nomination fight?
I'm so proud of Lily. That's why I guess I lit the mom's candle last night, because I just know somewhere Ann Richards and Molly Ivins are up there going, go Lily. But not just Lily, like all these young women, I think they are changing. I look at the young women in Congress. They're changing that place. I know that everyone knows Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, but she's not the only one. Ayanna Pressley is amazing. Lauren Underwood, this young woman, if you haven't met her, if y'all haven't had her at the Tribune, you have to have her. She's the youngest African-American woman ever to get elected to Congress. She's from Illinois. She beat 6 men in her primary. No one asked her to run. It's not like they said, it's your time. And then she went on to beat a Republican incumbent. And she is like rocking it on healthcare. She's a nurse. She understands what we need. So I guess when I wrote my book, one of the things that drove Mom crazy, because, of course, she was a housewife for a long time, as we called it in the day. I grew up in Dallas, and, as she said, if it was in the glossy magazine, she was doing it. We had, she was always redecorating the living room, and she was throwing the perfect dinner party. And it wasn't until much later in her life that the women's movement came along, and she just lost her mind, right? It was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And she ran Sarah Weddington's campaign here. That was her first job. That's amazing, right? First job, right? Was when Sarah ran for state rep. And that was how Mom eventually ran for county commissioner, and then eventually, of course, governor. And actually, let the record reflect, it's not like the Democratic Party ever asked her to run for governor, right? That was a brutal primary. Women were never asked. They were never the electable ones. So lest we think that, things were better at some other period. But one of the things I think, because it did take Mom a long time to actually kind of get liberated and get to do her thing, she was always impatient about young women. And I see this too. I saw it at Planned Parenthood that a young one would come to me and say, well, I was thinking about applying for that job, but I haven't finished my master's yet. And I don't, and all the reasons. And Mom was always like, don't wait for the perfect opportunity, and don't wait for someone to ask you. And so my motto now is start before you're ready, right? And that's, if more women did that, and I think more women are doing that, we would change the way our government looked. And I just think that's, as proud as Mom would be of Lily, she would be overwhelmed at what women across the country and here in Texas are doing.
And speak specifically about Texas. Who are the women you're watching most closely? Who are the standouts in state politics?
Oh my God, I can't start picking people in state politics in Texas, but there's a lot of them. Gina Hinojosa, she's fantastic. My friend Celia Israel. There's so many though. I don't want to start picking and choosing, but look at the young women, African-American women elected judges in Harris County. Look at, it's incredible, right? So I just think women are on the move here, and really you looked at looked at Beto's campaign, because I really followed that closely. I think they estimated that 75% of the volunteers on that campaign were women. A lot of women of color, and so we just need to invest in them, support them, move them up the ladder of leadership, because they're changing this state. Everything's changed in this state.
Well, we talked about Castro's debate performance. Where do you see O'Rourke's trajectory headed in this presidential cycle?
I don't have any idea. He's obviously, he's, as he said, he's on his path to do this. And look, I think he's a compelling candidate. He's a compelling, leader. I have no idea what's going to happen here. It's a lot of folks running.
A lot of folks running.
It's a lot of folks running.
Do you have any sense that this presidential slate, which has seemed to sort of edge further and further to the left, with every debate question, runs the risk of alienating the 35% of Americans who define themselves as politically moderate?
No, I don't think so at all. And in fact, I mean, look, this is true every presidential election, every election, is that the primaries are sort of this weeding out process where everyone does lean a little bit, to the left or to the right. And so I actually think that this country, and in fact, I think the candidates that are running are so common sense, and they are proposing things that are so popular, acceptable. I think that really the question is going to be simply, where do we want this country to go? And I was interested, I saw a poll last week from The Hill that said that 62% of women said they will not vote for Donald Trump. And if that holds true, he's not going to get reelected, which is really interesting and encouraging. But I also think that, I guess I'm a terrible prognosticator. I've supported so many people who lost, so I'm the last person to tap anyone. But I do believe there's going to be a woman on this ticket. I really do. I think that the time has come that you just can't ignore half the population anymore, and that's exciting. And there's a lot of women, whether they're the president or the vice president, there's a lot of women in this mix, and that is awesome.
All right, well, supermajority.
Let's hear it for women.
Yep.
Okay, we can clap for women.
So you all are having your first sort of official kickoff event or training event right here in Texas, in Austin. Why is that? Why have you all chosen Austin of anywhere you could be to start this?
Because my dad still lives here, and anytime I can come home and see him and get breakfast tacos, I will use that excuse.
It's a pretty good one.
That's not really true, but I am going to see my dad, and I am going to have a breakfast taco. But no, I wanted a place. This is our first training, and it's like we're learning and growing. And I was like, no place I'd rather be than Austin, Texas, to in my friendly family of activists and all the people I love here and that I grew up with and worked with on Texas Freedom Network and so on. I mean, my entire political career has had a connection to Texas. So tomorrow will be some experimentation, and we'll learn as we go, and it'll be a little bit of old home week, and that's awesome. And actually, when we launched Supermajority a couple months ago, we had, I think, 2,000 people join from Austin immediately. So I'm like, okay, we're going to go there first. So it'll be fun.
Easy choice. Yep. How much of a focus will Texas be for you as the politics here get more competitive? Could Texas be your microcosm, even though it's not very micro?
It's not very micro, but I think women here, we were talking about this the other night. Thousands and thousands and thousands of women got involved in the last election here, and they're not going away, and they want to know what's next. I actually think Texas is going to be a fascinating place. We obviously got a big Senate race. I hear rumors that my friend Wendy Davis might actually be running for Congress. I just saw her the other day. It's going to be, Texas is, as we all know, it's changing, it's turning. I think the energy of women is the thing that could put it over the edge. And so we'll see. I'm going to be fascinating tomorrow. We're going to have a very amazing array of women speakers, some not from Texas, but a ton of them here in Texas. And I'm kind of eager what they think. But I think that all the elements are here. And as we've seen, there was dramatic change in not just how people voted last cycle, but expanding the electorate. Because I think for years, people who followed Texas politics have been frustrated. I know I have been frustrated. As Richard Murray says, we're not a red state or a blue state, we're a non-voting state. So if you actually expand the electorate, you change everything. And that is definitely what Supermajority is focused on.
Well, it seems like there are a ton of women playing right now in this organizing space, whether it's, the resurgence of Pantsuit Nation or the Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter, Time's Up, Emily's List, the Women's March, and of course, Planned Parenthood. Where's the line of distinction for you all, and is there a risk of sort of new organization fatigue?
So it's funny. I think this would only be asked of women, never of men. Because I actually feel like women's organizing, leadership opportunities, political engagement has been underfunded for the last century. And so I feel like we are living in a moment in which it should be a moment of abundance and not scarcity. And I am really good friends with all the leaders of all the organizations that you just mentioned. And so I feel like women, more than any other group of people, are able to find their lane and are able to amplify the work of other women and other women's organizations. And that's what's going to make us all successful. one of the things I find, and this is I think Celia Israel, I saw she tweeted something at you about like what's changed in Texas. I'll tell you what I think has changed, not just in Texas, but around the country. When Mom ran for governor, she was like a unicorn. It was like, and then she started doing this like governor girls school because she was trying to get other women to run for governor. And actually Kathleen Sebelius, who then eventually became governor of Kansas, and Janet Napolitano from Arizona. They told me like, okay, it was because they got to come to the governor's mansion here, and then, then they ran for governor. But it was like one by one by one. And there wasn't this feeling of like solidarity that I think you have now. And now the overwhelming emotion I feel everywhere I go is the joy that women are taking in the success of other women. And that is, that's a total mind shift. And so one of the things that we really believe at Supermajority is amplifying the success and the skills and the talents of women everywhere, because it's going to take all of us to change the direction of this country. And I think getting back to a point you asked about whether this was simply a reaction to the current president, it's not. I actually think for a lot of women and a lot of women of color and a lot of working women, things weren't that great before this administration. And our aspirations have to be a lot higher than simply getting back to where we were. And that to me that's a radical revolutionary notion that I think is inspiring women.
Well, what happens to Supermajority beyond 2020?
We just keep going. And the exciting thing is I want to make sure that whoever comes into the White House in January, Supermajority and millions of women are there saying, okay, now it's time to do the right thing for women. And again, I think women are this amazing organizing force. We have things that have been unattended for so long, but I think there is also like a false dichotomy that somehow these are women's issues. I mean, equal pay, that hurts everybody. That hurts partners and families and kids and women. The lack of affordable childcare, it's not just a women's issue, but it has been up to women in many ways to lift these issues up. The fact that we don't have, assured maternity leave in this country, and that honestly, how is it that businesses still treat pregnancy as like a nuisance rather than a fundamental issue for millions of American workers? We just have to change that. And I don't believe that it's only women that will do it, or that only women care about these issues.
All right, well, we're about to open it up to questions, so get your questions ready. You were at Planned Parenthood for a dozen years. Is this what you're going to do for the next dozen?
I hope so. I love it. I love organizing women. I've been doing it my whole life. I started out as a union organizer with low-wage working women and actually on the border of Texas. And I think it's exciting. I love unleashing the power of women, giving them voice, giving them support. And so I hope that's what I'm doing. But who knows? You never know.
Well, I think we have microphones, 2 handheld mics. So raise your hands and please introduce yourself. Questions, not statements, would be awesome.
There's a young person here. Sorry, I see you, Ireland. I see you.
Miss Cecile, thank you so much for coming. Your mother was a hero of mine. If she had been sitting in front of the TV on election night in 2016 when she realized the Antichrist was headed to the White House, what do you think she would have said?
That's a good question. Could y'all hear that? Okay, you got the basic gist. I hate to say it, but I actually think she would be probably the least surprised because she had a really good handle on the pulse of, she was a big supporter, friend of Hillary's, all that. I think this backlash against women that's happening in this country, that he's the symptom, or he's not the it. I don't think that it would surprise Mom. And look, I think if you're fighting for important issues, social justice issues, electing different kinds of people, that you probably do lose more than you win. And she would be the first one to say, like, get back on the horse, right? there's no time for crying. And I do think that was her way. People sometimes ask me, it's funny, they say, God, women from Texas seem really tough. They think of Barbara Jordan, they think of Ann Richards, Molly Ivins. You could go down the list. And I said, well, of course women are tough in Texas. That's your only option, right? It wasn't like anyone's going to say, oh, let us open the door and welcome you in. And so I do think that was always her MO. And I guess like all of us, we have to see this as also an opportunity. Like we are being called at this moment in our history to lift up a vision of this country that right now is not being, I think, that our government isn't doing for us. And I think that is an exciting time, an important time for women to do that. But I wish she was here. I mean, there's so many ways I miss my mom, but I'm really sorry she died before Twitter, because can you imagine Ann Richards on Twitter and this president? It would have been game over. Anyway, right?
Hi, so I'm Ireland, and I'd like to thank you for everything you do. And I'd like to preface this with the fact that I'm 15, and so I feel like a lot of these political...
Can we give it up for Ireland? She's 15.
I feel like a lot of these political organizations, they often try to market themselves to young women, but they mean women over 18. And I know so many young women, such as myself, that really do want to be active. And I was wondering what Supermajority is going to do in order to allow young women like myself who are not over 18 to be active within the organization.
So I might just have to recruit you right here, Ireland, because I have had these amazing letters from young women, and I so believe when I was at Planned Parenthood, we invested in young women, even younger than you, because to me, that's where you form your confidence, your identity, your leadership skills, and so we should definitely talk later, because I feel like young women are the most, you are the most revolutionary and exciting and energized force in this country. And the other thing that Ireland I have seen is that the inspiration that older women like me get from being in rooms with younger women is just so overwhelming. And it's funny, I was thinking about this, that the other day, that when I first started Planned Parenthood, we had probably kind of lost some of our organizing chops and movement work. And women of a certain age would always say to me at a Planned Parenthood event, where are the young women? Where are they? And, we did all this work for them, right, Robbie? It was kind of like, just like and I'd say, well, have we actually invited them in? And so we spent the next 12 years investing in young women, giving them opportunities to go to get trained and learn how to lobby Congress and tell their stories. And by the time I left Planned Parenthood, that was never the question. And so I think that it is important that not only Supermajority, but any organization that wants to be relevant in the world has to lead with young women. So you're invited, okay? So we'll catch up after this. Okay, thank you. Thanks for being so courageous. Is that your mom?
That's my mom.
That's your mom?
Yes.
That's my daughter.
Oh my God.
One of the one of the most barrier-breaking female journalists in the country.
Oh, let's give it up. Okay, awesome. Your daughter is blushing. I don't know if you can see with the lights.
Probably I am too. I just wanted to remind everybody that actually Hillary Clinton did win a majority.
Thank you.
Of votes. And
3 million more votes, but who's counting?
And
right.
probably Stacey Abrams did too, if that hadn't been taken from her in Georgia. So what actually is Supermajority going to do to make sure that women who win majorities win elections?
No, I think yeah, exactly. And I'm glad you mentioned Stacey, because obviously, if every person in Georgia had been allowed to vote and every vote had been counted, she would be governor today. And this recent decision by the Supreme Court on gerrymandering is horrifying to think what will the implications are. So I actually feel, I have talked to Stacey about how, as part of, one of our values absolutely has to be the ability of people to vote and their vote to be counted. And there are people who are leading in that work, so I don't want to presume to kind of get ahead of them. But it's also important that we talk about and educate women to the fact that voting restrictions in this country are proven to be build bigger barriers for women of color, for working women, for working moms, more than any other group. So in fact, unless we have democracy reform, I kind of think if women were already 54 or 55% of the electorate, just imagine if we didn't have to face all the barriers we face to actually vote. I mean, we could just completely take over. So I do think you're hitting on a point that is so important, and obviously devastating here in the state of Texas, the lengths to which the state has gone to try to prevent people from voting and discouraging people from voting. And that's an issue, Ireland, too, that I think for young people, I mean, the efforts to keep young people from voting are outrageous because, as we know, that's how voting behavior starts. It starts very early. So we are firmly in your camp, and I hope we can actually educate women. And one of the things that's interesting, even when we've had these convenings, the basic questions that women have about civic participation, since I think we do a fairly poor job in America now of educating people about how voting works, how you can run for office. The most basic questions, I'm sure we'll have some of them tomorrow about civic participation. And in some ways, I think we have to begin to fill those gaps as NGOs that where I think government has not only fallen behind, but has intentionally tried to keep people from participating.
Here in front, in the white.
Hi, I'm just so excited to see a female journalist interview a female organizer. This is so exciting. You're both awesome. This is similar to the last question, but I'm curious about supermajority and being involved in voter registration, and I'll be at tomorrow's event, so I'm sure you'll talk more about it.
Okay. Yeah, great.
Curious to hear more about voter reg.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely partnering with a lot of organizations now on voter registration, and I think that will become. I mean, there's some states it's important right now, obviously, because they have off-year elections, but definitely next year as we go into it, I think part of the things that we want to train women on is how to actually do that work. And as you know, it differs state by state. And tomorrow we'll have some of the best experts in the state of Texas on what it takes to actually do registration. I mean, it's going to be interesting. I think the 2020 is going to be a record voter turnout year, which means we need to do a voter registration, but we also have to make sure that all the folks that are turning out are able to vote, to the point earlier, and that they're educated about what's at stake. Because I think I don't think we can count on just the news, except for the Texas Tribune. We count on just the news for women to actually understand where candidates stand on the issues that they care about.
Hi, I've been in Austin since I was 16.
It's on.
I'm sorry. I've lived here since I was 16, and I was very much a part of the second wave feminists in Austin in the 70s. Women Take Back the Night, National Organization of Women, and so forth. And my question is more about what I see as the splintering of social skills and gatherings, because I also was the first social worker at People's Community Clinic during the AIDS Holocaust, and became an AIDS activist in the late 80s, early 90s. And so where I'm going with all of that is, essential to what we did was the sense of face-to-face community meetup. And I go out and posters on the drag, and everywhere you went, there was people that were very articulate, okay, even though many people were left out. Like in the second wave of feminism, women of color, many lesbians were discriminated against, and so forth. But my point is, how do you address how technology is siloing us, right, in order to create community? And then the last thing I wanted to say is really from my own heart, is that I am most struck that the question, the way this open-ended question early in your talk today was answered by so many women, was empathy. Because that is exactly, in my opinion, what women bring to the table that is quite different from what most men in power have. And I hate to put it like that.
No, it's great. I mean, I too was struck by it, and I think it actually, it's, so I guess the short answer to your question, which is a really good one, is that what I have seen, and I think what we're experimenting with by doing a lot of offline organizing as well as online organizing, is that women kind of want both. They want like skills. At least when when you ask, and we've been doing a lot of asking. Women want training on specific skills, like how do I talk about these issues? How do I engage in voter registration? How do I do things? But they also want to build community. And I hate to say it, but I think a lot of women in this country just feel very lonesome right now. They feel like, they're fighting back in the ways they know, but they don't know, is this really how everyone else feels? I remember when I started the Texas Freedom Network, it was actually kind of the same mentality. It was just sort of like, this is all happening. Does everyone else agree with this? And so I think making sure that we are building community and being attentive to building community in a multiracial, intergenerational way is really critically important. And that's, so it's not just a tactical thing. I think it is a community building thing. We've been doing actually some just initial phone calls where folks could just call in from around the country and be on a webinar. And we've had thousands of women do that. And partly it is because they want information, but partly is they just want to see other women, And if we can do anything to address that sort of sense of alienation and loneliness or just kind of hopelessness, then we will really be onto something. But I think it's all, and as you say, learn from the mistakes of our past by trying to start in a fully inclusive way. And I'm excited about that.
Hi, my name is Amy Meredith, and I am actually a candidate. So my question for you
What are you running for, Amy?
I am running for a felony criminal district bench here in Travis County.
Okay, good for you.
So
good for you.
Thank you. Thank you. One question that I would love to hear your insight on is the down ballot races. I will be almost at the very bottom. So what would you recommend on the down ballot on these local races?
Yeah, go door to door and meet every single person. It's a really important question because, and in fact, I think that based on this whole Supreme Court decision, we know anyone who is not focused on all of the races, we are. This election, there will be record turnout for the presidential race, but it's not going to do us any good if we actually don't have people vote up and down the ballot. So, and I think one of the things I'm excited about in Texas, and I'm not an expert on this, Emily probably is we have to start competing in every election, right? I mean, that is why people turn out, is because one of the exciting things, this is a little bit of a tangent, but one of the exciting things about Stacey Abrams' race was Lucy McBath running in a congressional district and getting elected in a very tough district, going to Congress as a woman who, was running because of her son being murdered and her realizing the criminal justice system was broken. And she was just this incredible, and she helped lift Stacey as well. And so it is the down ballot races that often can create the enthusiasm and energy and sense of community that drives turnout as well. We can't just count on this happening at the top. So I think that just thank you for running. I know I was talking to Stephanie Shriak. Yeah, exactly. Stephanie Shriak, the leader of Emily's List, and I were together the other day. We've now had 46,000 women in this country raise their hand and say they want to run for office. And so just channeling Ann Richards, I'd say, just start before you're ready. Don't wait for someone to ask you. Don't wait till you have got all the things checked off in the boxes. This is the time. Run now. So I'm glad you are.
Well, unfortunately, we are out of time. Thank you all so much for coming, and a huge round of applause for Cecile Richards.
Thank you
for
Emily.
joining us today.
Thank you.
And if you can help out with any of our border crowdfund, remember that Sarah Glenn is your woman in the back there, or you can do it online, texastribune.org/give. Thanks again. Have a great afternoon.